Geology students, or should I say good morning, or should I say bonjour, or should I say guten Tag? It is Wednesday, July the 8th, 2020, and I'm going to finish this chapter that we've been talking about called mass wasting. This will be the last video that you will need to watch for this test that is on July the 13th, a Monday. And we already talked about the different kinds of mass wasting. Avalanches are the fastest, then rock falls, then we talk about rock slides, the next fastest. We talked about mud flows, earth flows, soil creep, and now we're going to talk about the last type of mass wasting, and we're also going to talk about ways in which you can stop mass wasting, which is very useful when you buy real estate. Okay, let's first talk about solifluction. That's the last type of mass wasting. And solifluction occurs in cold climates like Canada or Alaska or parts of Russia. And what happens is that when you're in a very cold place, let's say this is a slope and you build your house here on this slope. There's a bird up here. It's taking a crap on your house here. Just kidding. All right. So if you're in a cold place, there is something called the permafrost layer. And I'm going to try and draw it in here. And this layer is a layer called permafrost, which is permanently frozen, meaning that even during the summer, the soil there is frozen. The soil on top of the permafrost layer, on the other hand, freezes every winter and it thaws out during the summer. So let's say I had a little pebble right here, represented by that red dot. What's going to happen to that pebble every winter when the soil freezes? Well, you know that water expands, and so that's going to cause that pebble to move up. Then during the summer, gravity is going to pull that pebble straight down. So over time, the soil is going to move down slope like this. I don't know if you have any relatives or friends or know anybody who lives in Anchorage or some Nome or some of those places up in Alaska or in maybe Ottawa in Canada. Well, they have to deal with something called solifluction, meaning that this solifluction is going to cause your house to have extreme damage. If you're in the Anchorage area and you're buying a house in one of those colder climates, you need to know how deep it was the foundation dug for your house. If the foundation of your house is dug above the permafrost layer or just into the permafrost layer, your house is going to move down slope. So older houses get destroyed that way. And so what are you looking for when you're buying real estate? You want to have a house where the foundation is dug underneath the permafrost layer. And that's going to cost you more money, but you're going to have less problems. In the long run, it's worth it. Your insurance is also going to be much lower. Insurance companies are there to make money. They know how deep the foundation of your house is, and if it's not under the permafrost layer, it's going to cost you a lot of money to insure your house. The bottom line is that's the last type of mass wasting. It's called solifluction, and it's important in northern climates, very cold places. So when you buy real estate and you have a mass wasting problem, what can you do as a mitigation? What a mitigation means You can use engineered methods to stop the mass wasting. The most popular way here in East Tennessee, and there's many contractors you can hire. Go online and make sure they're reputable and shop around for a price. So let's say you bought a piece of property in Morgan County, Campbell County, Anderson County, and you find there's a lot of mass wasting occurring there, or you already bought that property. Well, if you're buying the property, you want to negotiate a lower price because of the mass wasting, and you want to show them photographs of the mass wasting. You can have the geologist do that for you if you want. And then the savings you have made in buying that real estate, you can use to buy a retaining wall. And a retaining wall is a wall like this wall here, built to stop mass wasting. Now, in this case, it was built to protect a road, but let's say this is your house over here. Well, whenever there's mass wasting, the debris will collect behind the wall. And then it might be every 10 years or so, then you have to have somebody come in here with a pickup truck and a whole bunch of guys with shovels, or you can have a bulldozer or a skip loader come in and clear out the area behind the wall. You want the wall to be strong enough to withstand the mass wasting, because if it doesn't, the retaining wall will crack or buckle. You might have drainage here. Remember, anything you could do to remove water from that slope is going to reduce mass wasting. So you might want to spend some extra money. Have a little gravel fill here dug in, and have a drainage pipe, and every time water gets into the slope, it drains out through this pipe and into the gutter and into the sewer system. So you're doing two things when you have a wall like this. You're holding up the mass wasting from getting onto your property or onto a road, and you're draining the slope. Anything you can do to take water out of that slope is going to reduce your chance of mass wasting. Now, what do I mean by spending enough money to so that you have a retaining wall that can withstand mass wasting? Well, let's see what happens when you buy a cheap retaining wall. If it fails, the mass wasting is going to just tear down the wall and the debris will collect. This is a bad retaining wall here. You can see that it didn't work. Some people do stupid things. They build retaining walls out of lumber or pressure-treated lumber. That's going to rot. Even pressure-treated lumber is going to rot after a while, and then it'll weaken. So you don't want to skimp on this kind of stuff. You want to build a retaining wall that's going to hold. What else can we use to stop mass wasting? Well, I already mentioned before, we could take water out of the slope. That's another thing, by drilling a well. Here's another common way to do it. Let's say you want to build a house, and you find some steep property, and there's a lot of mass wasting that has occurred here. The seller is going to want to get rid of that property because he's not going to be able to sell it. It's so steep, and there's evidence of mass wasting there. Well, you can go and buy it cheap, and then have a contractor come in with a bulldozer, skip loader, or a F-350 and 5 guys with shovels, and you could dig out what this is called a bench, B-E-N-C-H, in the slope. And you remove the material here and you dump it over here. And what have you done by doing that? Well, now this slope is more stable because you've made it less steep. And so I'll draw a picture for you here. So you bought a piece of property and it's on a steep slope. What you could do is remove some of that slope and you could bench it. This is called benching. And maybe you want to be on the safe side and make another bench. And let's say your house is down here. You've just stabilized the slope considerably by benching the slope, because the slope is less steep now, and um, therefore you're going to have less chance of mass wasting. You might want to even build a retaining wall down there. But the material that collects from the mass wasting, represented by these red dots, is going to collect, and maybe every 10 years go out there and remove this debris by using a bulldozer or a bunch of guys with shovels. You could further stabilize the slope by building a retaining wall, so that anything that gets past these benches could be will be stopped by the wall. So that's called benching. What else can you do to stop mass wasting? Well, I'm sure you've seen this on properties around Norris Dam, where they use rock bolts. Again, compare prices and see what is the best for you. But people like to live near Norris Dam, and a lot of these properties are too expensive for most people to buy. So what they do is they buy on a steep slope. They get the property cheap that way, and then they use rock bolts. Okay, here you can see. Do you ever see things like this? You can see these things along the sides of roads when they want to stabilize slopes, or on steep slopes where people build their houses. These things are called rock bolts. And the way they work is um, the contractor comes in and puts these things, there's a tube that goes through this, into the slope. These are made of cast iron, and there's these little tubes that go through the center of this cast iron square, and they inject a clay into this tube, and it's a special type of clay called Montmorillonite. Anyway, I'm not going to spell it out for you. It's too hard drawing here. But you don't need to memorize the name of the clay. They inject a clay in there, and it's wet. It's a wet clay. And then what that clay does is it gets into all the little cracks in the rock in the slope, and it fills them up with this wet clay. When the wet clay dries, it expands, and it's like a glue, an epoxy, and it glues. It strengthens the whole slope around that rock bolt. So this slope, even though it's very steep, has been stabilized by these rock bolts. And then you could have you ever driven down the Oak Ridge Turnpike, going from Oak Ridge to Clinton? You'll see a whole bunch of rock bolts there, and then they put a wire mesh fence around here. So even if there is any mass wasting, it's going to fall behind that fence and not get onto the road. Well, you could do that too. If you buy a piece of property and it's very steep, you get it for a low price, and you use that money to shore up the slope by using rock bolts and a wire mesh fence. A contractor will come in and do that for you. Then your slope is stable and you can build up here, or you can build down here. So those are different ways that engineers and geologists can work with the homeowner. If you have a piece of property already and you have mass wasting problems and you're worried, you can shop around, look for retaining wall prices and rock bolts, look into drilling a well. You can also use trees. Plant trees on your slope. Not trees with shallow roots, but trees with deep roots that'll hold the soil in. You could remove some of the slope and dump the rest down slope. And if there's no place to dump that, then you ask Anderson County or Roane County where you can dump this stuff. There are places in each county where you're allowed to dump this stuff. And you could think about drainage. Let me show you another way. See this drainage pipe here? You can put a bunch of drainage pipes in there so that any water that gets in the slope will drain and run into the water system. And you can buy them camouflage colors so they're not so ugly like this one. Here you can see your rock bolts. When you live along a coastline, how are you going to stop mass wasting? Well, let me show you. If you live along a coastline, like you can see that these houses here, sorry, I didn't comb my hair this morning. All right, it's kind of slow. Okay, these houses here have probably lost most of their value. Why? Well, look at the sea cliff erosion here. You're not going to be able to sell this house very easily, and you're probably worried about losing most of your backyard or even part of your house. What you could do to shore up this slope here is put in some rock bolts here, buy sand that's called beach nourishment to widen this beach so the waves crash farther offshore. That would be a way to stabilize your slope and increase the value of your property. And then you need see all this bare rock here? You need to find some plants that will grow on there and hold the slope together. You can use a whole variety of different techniques to increase the value of your property. I don't want to give you too much information for the next test, so this is kind of a short video, but watch it, and the test will be next Monday. I hope you are doing good in your self-isolation and all that. I'll talk to you later.